Welcome to Zelda's Peaches and Biscuits podcast. I'm Alaina Doughton, the director of the Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald Museum, and I'm joined by
Maura Martello. I'm a Zelda researcher, and I also am a docent here at the museum. Welcome.
And today we're going to talk about Zelda's early party days. The very early party days.
Starts very young.
Yes, we have one as early as 2.5, I think. So we did want to discuss her early parties, and part of the reason is to give a kind of early foundation of what her childhood was like, but how social it was. I was really surprised when we were doing all the original research how active her sisters were, how they're going to, all three of her sisters are constantly organizing parties, going to parties, dances.
Arranging them.
And in the early years, you hardly, you see almost no mention of Zelda. So that's the question going forward as we reach the high school days. I know there's at least one biography, I'm sorry, I've gone blank, but they say, her sisters weren't inordinately popular.
Yeah, a lot of the books say that.
And we found that it's exactly the opposite. Particularly Rosalind, Clotilde, even Marjorie are extremely popular. And I just wonder how that affects young Zelda. So anyway, we thought we'd talk about some of these early parties today. And then when you begin to read the details, all these fabulous, interesting details of what these parties were like comes to bear. So the first one, I thought we'd start with a few in which her sisters were at. And again, one of the earliest was Zelda. She's like 2.5 years old. But the first one says, a pretty birthday party was given last Wednesday afternoon at Oak Park by Miss Annie Elizabeth Perkins to celebrate the 15th anniversary of her birthday. That's an odd way of saying she's 15. A bevy of beautiful young girls enjoyed themselves dancing, as girls only can at that age, free from guile, affectation, or worldliness. It was a lovely picture.
Now we're at Oak Park.
At Oak Park. So I would imagine it's the Oak Park Pavilion. You'll see that on our show pages. It was like a big...
It was an open air pavilion.
I don't know. Looking at the picture, I thought so. To me, it looks like a very large gazebo. And then when I was looking for a picture for the show notes, it looked enclosed. I don't know, but it's a large structure. They seem to have, in one of these parties, it talks about how they had hired an orchestra, because that's the other thing. They always talk about their dancing. Zelda's always going to these dances. And I was very curious, well, where's the music coming from? Because, we barely have Victrolas at this point. It's not like you have full PA systems.
Could it have been bands or orchestras?
Yeah, so I think it's bands and orchestras. And then when you think... Scott Fitzgerald names the Jazz Age. It's from his collection of short stories. But jazz is already prevalent here in the South. It's prevalent here in Alabama. So and even Mayfield talks about that they were accustomed to hearing live jazz and jazz bands. So I'm just wondering what the music was like. I'm sure in the this is 1902, still pretty ragtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, also Oak Park Pavilion became famous, of course, in Zelda history or nostalgia, is that this is where the script dances took place later on when she was a very popular teenager. We'll get into that, I'm sure, at a later date.
But again, this is her sister is attending a birthday party. So later, I thought that they would be larger. What we're talking about, the script dances for when the soldiers are here in the early, like the 1918s and stuff. But 1902, I'm terrible at guessing, but this is a long list of girls. So I guess you could either rent out the Oak Park Pavilion.
Of course, we don't know when the script dances started. For all we know, it was going on for a long time.
Well, they had a lot of dances, yeah. But this is clearly an all-girl. Everyone in here is Miss this, Miss that, and it's a who's who of Montgomery names. And in the middle of it is Miss Rosalind Sayre.
Yeah, the Sayre sisters are always
They're always, the other thing is...
in the newspapers.
There was a reunion, and I'll have to look it up, but there was when they had some sort of reunion in the 40s or I think the 50s, maybe even 60s, and they were mentioning that Rosalind and her sister was always winning things. And the reason that their names turn up in all these parties is that they are winning all the prizes at these parties. And so the next story we have it's under the Women in Society section, and it says Miss Pauline Townsend entertains at cards. And I think this is another distinction between Zelda and her sisters, is that Marjorie especially turns up at a lot of these bridge parties. I think Rosalind to a certain degree. We know that Clotilde, that she moves, but that these bridge parties are a major social event. And it says, Miss Pauline Townsend entertained a charming party last evening at the home of her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carrie B. Townsend on Galway Street. And it says the reception hall and parlor were effectively decorated in a color scheme of pink and white. Ribbons of pink and white tissue were festooned from the corners of the rooms to the chandeliers, where they were caught by clusters of pink and white roses, giving a fairy-like appearance. On the mantels and piano were vases of roses of the same tints, and the brightness of the decorative scheme was enhanced by groups of ferns and trailing vines.
Sounds very Victorian, actually, but very beautiful at the same time.
And all of these parties have these very lavish descriptions of all these greenery, flower, and where are they
coming from?
Where are they coming from? Because we know that to this day, Rosemont Gardens is the primary florist, but I can't imagine, are they paying or do they have gardens?
Clippings,
Clippings. Are they clipping from gardens?
Perhaps girls went into their own gardens and brought flowers to these parties, and they were arranged from there. God knows that even in August, this
is a September.
In Montgomery in Alabama, I mean, you have so much things still in bloom.
Yeah, up until I think October.
Yeah. And
here it's
very exotic things as well. It's at least to me, hibiscus and gardenia.
Yeah.
You don't really see this stuff in New Jersey or New York.
I think the rule of thumb is that it can freeze until Easter, and then it can be warm until Halloween. Yeah. If you heard that, I think we just had a jet fly over. It's not uncommon. Yeah. You can think of like Zelda. They were always pilots.
They're barrel rolling over our museum here.
They were always. I forget the term. They were
calling for Alana to come out and wave.
And then it says Hearts was the game played. The scorecards were lovely designs in pink and white. The first prize, a dainty white fan, was won by Miss Fannie Mae Tuttle. The consolation prize, a bottle of perfume, was won by Miss Rosalind Sayre. And the booby prize was a pocketbook, which was awarded to Miss Ida Mae Galatas. And so the prizes at these events also, we'll talk about in a second, but these are not insignificant prizes. No. Because I tried to, and you can, again, we'll have all this on the show pages, but I was trying how much is a pocketbook? And like my grandmother called her purse a pocketbook. Mm-hmm. Is there a pocketbook and so I just assumed pocketbook was something for a woman. And when you found it has the little envelope opening or the kiss lock, what they call kiss lock, pocketbooks. But when I did a search to see if I could find a picture of a pocketbook from Alabama that time period, 3/4 of the stories were about how a man had lost or someone had found a man's pocketbook. So I don't know what a man's pocketbook would look like. Was it just a
version of a wallet?
Yeah, is it just a name for a wallet or because we have a very nice, we believe it's from the Sayre family, but it's almost like a metal mesh. And a kiss lock, if you don't know what a kiss lock purse is, it's where it's the two pieces of metal meet and you pinch them open or pinch them closed, and they kind of open up like kind of like
evening bags tend to have
yes.
Them. Yeah.
And so that was the predominant style. And then, but the little one that we have is rather ornate. I don't think it's but it's maybe 2-3 inches wide. It's very small. Mm-hmm. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to get, like, today you might be able to get lipstick and maybe a handkerchief in it. So, and I'm just wondering also the perfume.
Why would that be a booby prize, I wonder? Do you want to explain what a booby prize is?
Well, my understanding, and tell me if you have the same, the booby prize is kind of the last place prize. But then it says that Rosalind got the consolation prize. So I would have thought the booby prize was a consolation. So is consolation second place? So you have the winner, the consolation, and then the last place.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So I was looking at basic prices, and because there's another one where Rosalind wins chocolates, a box of chocolates, and then Zelda wins a heart-shaped box of chocolates.
Now that must have really excited Zelda. Because we know she had a sweet tooth as a child. There's a
lot of food going on at these parties. Because in this it says, after the game, delicious refreshments carrying out the pink and white scheme were served. Pink and white bonbons decorated the tables. And so bonbons are, I looked, these are on the show pages, but we're talking like $1 worth is the equivalent of $26. So, and some of these booby prizes range from 25 cents, 50 cents to $1. So we're talking $7, $15, $25, $26 per prize. So these are not, it's not like you went to the dollar store and got, like today you have a kid's party, you go to the dollar store, you get those gift bags or whatever. To host one of these things, it was an undertaking. It was a cost, the time, you think about how we decorate now. The other thing is that you think, well, or I was saying, there are so many of these social events in these. There's one, I swear, every week.
Yeah. Do you think they
had to rotate?
Rotate, exactly.
So there must have been like this party arms race. Like we had more,
That. I'm sure that's true. I absolutely, and women would vie for the best party.
Yes, and then also the guests. There's always a very long guest list, and the guests, and the other thing is, why are these in the newspaper? Because the newspapers are basically, looking at it from today's standpoint, is social media. And a friend and I were talking about the phrase, the etymology of the phrase, your 2 cents worth. Where does that come from? Some thinks it comes from the Bible, the widow's mite, she gave her 2 cents. And, there's varying, and then one was that they believed that it cost 1 to 2 cents to put your comment in the paper so that you were getting, so if you wanted to comment on something in the personal section, and you do see these little comments, social comments, that it costs 2 cents to put these things in. So some people think that was also, you were getting your 2 cents in, or your 2 cents worth. But the thing is, are people paying to have these parties listed? Or don't know. Because this is under Women in Society. But there are these...
Mrs. J.M. Can you see that name here?
I think it's...
J.M. Decotz.
Decotz, D-E...
Decottis.
Yeah, Decotz.
But sort of, Rosalind does this later.
Yes, Rosalind later becomes a society reporter, and then she goes to Birmingham, and we will probably do an episode on Rosalind and her writing, because I think Rosalind is who Zelda is trying to live up to. I don't think the biographies have it correct, and that Zelda was just this star that outshone her family. I think Zelda was trying to be more like her mother, but more specifically like Rosalind.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think what happens with Fitzgerald biographers is that they take the F. Scott Fitzgerald's side in the argument that somehow Rosalind was an enemy of some sort, when in fact, he did write the famous story Babylon Revisited about Rosalind, in which she is the villain. But it's not only Zelda's preferred sister.
Yeah.
Scotty Fitzgerald, the daughter of Zelda, becomes
They're very
Rosalind's
close.
great friend.
Yes, when
and
she
her
moves back.
caretaker.
Also, Rosalind's husband, Newman Smith, I think Scott so looked up to him. Because he was a war hero. They lived in Istanbul and then Belgium. I really think that in some ways Scott and Zelda were trying to be Newman and Rosalind. And even in Babylon Revisited, in a way she's the villain, but it's the character is based that she wants to take care of the child.
Yeah.
I don't know that's entirely a villain. I think
Well, he certainly felt she was a villain. I mean, I've read enough.
Well,
think.
Well, he didn't like it because she thought that Scotty was not cared for. She wanted, why? Because when Zelda's in the hospital in Switzerland, Scotty is with a nanny in Paris, and Scott's off with the Murphys somewhere. He's not even with Scotty. Yeah. He's just left her. Thank God they were decent, nannies or nurses.
Yeah, she apparently had wonderful nurses.
And that is the time that Rosalind, because they're living in Belgium. And I just don't know if they didn't know, but the biographies don't seem to acknowledge that when the Fitzgeralds are in Europe, they're actually geographically quite close to Rosalind and Newman, and even somewhat maybe in their shadow, because he worked for the bank, but he was also part of the rebuilding the war, the post-World War I rebuilding of Europe effort. And so Rosalind says, why don't you send Scotty to us? So that's my question, is if you look at Scott and Zelda for all their fame, all of their, who were their inspirations? And I think Newman, we know Scott held Newman Smith very highly because in the transcripts he speaks of Newman Smith. And we even have Newman's sword, his scabbard here, which was very prized and dedicated. So we know. I think that they are who the Fitzgeralds were kind of striving to be, or that I think it's a possibility.
Zelda, I believe, idolized Rosalind.
Yeah, and we know that she and Scott. And the other thing that I find interesting, even though it's coincidental,
and maybe that was the problem,
is that Scotty really fashions herself after Rosalind. And Rosalind marries Newman Smith, and then Scotty's second marriage was to Smith. So when Scotty returns to Montgomery, a number of people said she came to Montgomery because this is the one place she wasn't a Fitzgerald, and that she was a Sayre, but she also shared the name with Rosalind. They were both Scotty Smith and Rosalind Smith, so they had a very close relationship. So going back to the parties.
Sorry about
No.
Detour?
It's a great. I love the detours.
Yeah.
So the Christmas tree party, again, we see Rosalind mentioned along with Clotilde Sayre. So you see in a number of these parties that Rosalind and Clotilde are going together. And this is Master Henry Tripp entertained last evening at a Christmas tree party at the home of his aunt, Mrs. C.B. Townsend, on Goldwaith Street. And it says Santa Claus appeared on the scene and distributed lovely presents to all the small delighted guests. The tree was beautiful with its decorations of tinsel and bright lights. So this is 1902. It's Goldwaith Street. The family doesn't move to this neighborhood. We looked up till 1908. But they're still, and I was curious.
Do we know where they were living at that time?
We know from these, we'll see in a minute, they were on Amanda Street, which I haven't been able to figure out. Amanda seems a lost street. There's no Amanda Street today. It's probably, I don't know, somewhere downtown, because then they moved to Madison Avenue, which is still a major, and that's the Capitol Heights area. And Capitol Heights, I think, architecturally is very similar to Cloverdale. I think Cloverdale is more preserved as a neighborhood, I think. But so they go from wherever Amanda Street is to Madison Avenue, and then in September of 1908, they moved to Pleasant Avenue.
Yeah, Amanda Street. Well, I was going to try to see while you're talking if I can locate something about Amanda.
But the other thing about this Christmas party is they do, and it must have been Christmas Eve because this was published on the 25th. But they do have a Santa there, but the tree was decorated with tinsel and bright lights. do we think they had electric lights yet? What?
It's possible. It's possible.
Because if so, bright lights, you have candles.
It's also not necessarily probable. Candles, a gas light.
Yeah, I just think if there were bright lights and they are new electric lights, this is an indication that it's they have electric lights, which we're quite used to now, but
Was a somewhat new thing in those days. Yeah.
And then the next one, it's just like a month or so later. It's the New Year's Eve or the New Year's party. And it says, Miss Jessie Gray Ware entertained charmingly at a New Year's dance Wednesday evening at her home on South Court Street. So again, South Court, South Perry, these are the very wealthy homes at that time. It says the decoration of the rooms were of holly and other Christmas greens, heightened with touches of red satin ribbon. The guests danced the old year out and the new year in, wishing for their young hostess an equal share of happiness during the new year, which they enjoyed through her hospitality at its birth. And then again, you see Rosalind and Clotilde are at these. And my question is, because of the age gap, and this is 1903, this might be a little young, but did Zelda, seeing her sisters, because when we looked it up, for every time you see Zelda, you see two, like for every story for Zelda, and there are a lot, you see 2 for Clotilde, 3 for Rosalind. And my question is that the opposite. Was Zelda kind of jealous like Amy in Little Women? Her older sisters are going out to these fabulous parties, coming home clearly with boxes of chocolate, purses, perfume, all these gifts. Was there somewhat of a jealousy factor? Because in Save Me the Waltz, the one, is it Joan?
Joan, who is Clotilde.
Clotilde. There is a kind of distance and irks, there's like, she gets away with it. But there was this duality, and it just makes you wonder if Minnie really did baby or pamper Zelda. What was Zelda getting if her sisters are going to parties
and coming home
with all this stuff? What were they giving to smooth that over with a young Zelda? I'm just thinking of the sibling dynamic.
Well, it must have been from Zelda's point of view. I can't wait to grow up. I can't wait to get to be, 15, where I can also get all these prizes and wear these beautiful clothes, and I envy, if not jealousy.
Or I just wonder if they had to buy her off. Okay, here's your box. Your sisters are going out. Here's your box of chocolates or did maybe she didn't care. I don't know. That's a question.
Mama Sayre passing the chocolate under the table,
or
take it.
Because we know she's constantly going to Maze. Like, we haven't covered Maze, but she's constantly downtown buying candy. And I don't know. Well, I used to think that couldn't have been that common. But last week we found out that there are vendors surrounding the school playground with popcorn and ice cream.
I think I was just reading a book. I think it might have been Nancy Milford's book, in which she talks about Zelda would cut class. Now, this is a little later on in life, when she's at Sidney Lanier. And they would go into this neighborhood that doesn't exist anymore called Baghama. Mm-hmm. It's on South Decatur Street. It was originally was an African-American area. And in fact, I think it's people like Rosa Parks lived there. It's no longer there. ASU University is there. Patterson Court is there.
Oh, okay.
But she would go. There was a candy store there. So at 14 or 15, she was buying tons of candy, and then they would go downtown to see a movie.
Yeah,
she would be with her girlfriends. So apparently, this was something she did very much in her early years.
I just wonder if the beginnings of this are, her sisters are coming home with boxes of chocolate and candies from these parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, we've only done a cross-section, and we have, 10 of these?
Now, there's no stories about her as an older person having a sweet tooth. We don't read much about that.
No, in fact, it becomes the opposite, that she will only eat. Well, we know that she was a very picky eater, and that her mother would find her something else. Yeah. but that she was only eating tomato sandwiches to keep her weight down as she got older. The next one is a good luck party, and it's March of 1903. And this one, it's very close to St. Patrick's Day, but there's no mention because let's face it, the Irish were marginalized at this time point. But it seems very Irish. The good luck consisted in finding clover leaves in the grass. The leaves were of cardboard and painted in watercolors, and each was tied to a candy kiss, which contained a pretty verse. Miss Rosalind Sayre found the largest number and was awarded a prize, a box heart-shaped candy. So it sounds like an Easter egg hunt, but I want to know what these painted clovers were. It sounds quite lovely and quite beautiful. It sounds like a lot of work. Did they buy these watercolor clovers and hide them in the lawn, or? Mm-hmm. Then the next, it says a donkey game was also a pleasant feature, and Miss Elizabeth Coleman won the prize in this and was given a beautifully dressed doll. And again, this sounds like an arms race. Like, well, at my party, we're going to have painted clovers, and you will win this beautiful doll. And then, at my party, we'll have, all this stuff.
I have no doubt that occurred. People do it today.
Oh, I know, but it's just interesting to see the amount of work, but also these families, they did have, as we say, back then it would have been, they would have had help. They would have had cooks and maids and whatnot. And today
it's, do the wash for you, washerwomen, gardeners. I think, I know at Pleasant Avenue that Zelda's mother kept staff for many, many years. We have letters in which Zelda says they need a pension, they need work.
Yeah.
When the Depression hits.
Well, also, there was a lady that came into the museum, and she mentioned that, and we were hinting at it in one of our first, that this is also the time period you're beginning to see refrigerators, you're beginning to see very rudimentary, but beginning to see washing machines, stoves in the house, and that domestic help is not as needed, that more and more is falling to women, and that as an industry recedes, I guess.
So the domestic industry?
Yeah, domestic, so that you might have had 2 or 3 people, but I don't know if that's true, because if you think about the bus boycotts, a lot of those women that took those buses were still domestic help into the 60s.
Yes.
But maybe it shifted somehow. We'll have to look more into that. The next party, and in this Zelda makes an appearance, is a birthday party, and this is in March of 1902. And it says, one of the pretty affairs of the past week was a surprise party given on last Monday evening at the home of Miss Mamie Taylor on Amanda Street. It was given in honor of Miss Taylor's cousin, and the home was decorated with cut flowers, and their beauty and fragrance made a pretty spring scene. It says the young people danced until a late hour when fruit punch and ice cream were served. And you think, Zelda's 2.5 years old. So, and her sisters are not mentioned in this, those who were present were, and they always have this long list of people. And this party has both, girls and boys are mentioned. And it says the little host blew out the candies before the cake was cut. It says the stand in the center of the table, which held the birthday cake with the 4 lit candles on it, rested on a large lace centerpiece over pink satin. So you think late into the night.
I don't know what hour that would have been.
We've mentioned that things seem to be going later in the night from what we would expect, but here's a 4-year-old. Zelda Sayre is mentioned, 2.5. What kind of parties?
Well, she was a party girl from a young age.
Well, apparently
Montgomery
was
podcast,
quite a social. There was quite a social scene. So this idea that Montgomery was this very quiet, because Zelda's, there's nothing to do, and I think biographers have taken her at her word. But there is something going on all the time here, and you think, well, maybe they don't have TV. movies are kind of coming, because this is the early night. This is like 1903. You have a Victrola, but they are creating their own entertainment.
Yeah. I think also some of Fitzgerald's Tarleton stories, which of course is really Montgomery.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the heat in Montgomery so much in these stories, and how people just kind of did nothing because they were hot. His stories always feature, girls named Sally who are just kind of hanging out the window. Too hot to move. Should we go to the river and take a swim? Should we go to the creek and take a swim? And maybe that's.
I think that's probably true during the. I think that's probably true during the day, though, but not at night. Yeah. I think the summer heat explains why there's so much at night, because it's cooler. I mean, it drops down to, even now it's probably 90s during the day here, and then recently we've had a lot of afternoon rains, and then it drops down to about 70 at night.
Yeah.
So you can see why during
I just think it may become a cliche in people's minds that
no one's doing anything. What we're finding, they're doing quite a lot. Yeah. It's just they're doing it well into the late evening, which may be a cultural difference that we don't realize. I don't know in New York so when Scott and Zelda are staying out late when they go to New York, well, she's apparently from 2 years old. Used to staying out. Incredible. So the next one is a birthday party, another one. It's 1903, and it says, Little Miss Leila McGuire, the daughter of Mrs. Julia McGuire, entertained some friends at a party on Friday afternoon when she celebrated her 4th birthday. And says the home was of her grandmother, Mrs. J.A. Jones, on Goldwaite Street. And again, we get the second Goldwaite Street, because this is the area in which the Sayres are going to move. So I don't know if it's because they already have a lot of social connections in the area, because they're living, most people know, Madison Avenue.
It's basically downtown.
Yeah, it's down, but it's on the other side. So we're talking 4 or 5 miles away. Mm-hmm. So they moved there to Pleasant Avenue, which is right by Goldwaite Street. And again, today, this is where the Equal Justice Memorial is. I think the western edge of the Equal Justice is Goldwaite Street.
Yeah.
And it says, was decorated in a scheme of pink and green, in which scarves of pink and green ribbons, cut flowers, and plumosa were tastefully used to produce a lovely effect. The amusements of the occasion were dancing and games, and the little hostess was gowned in a dainty toilette of white and blue, and she received a large number of presents from friends who wished her many returns on the day. And then again, we get this long list of people. And in this, we see that she's wearing blue, and then in another, I think one of the final ones, we see that the little girls are mentioned as wearing white and blue. And this is a question we get quite a lot for people at the museum, is the opposite the pink. Why does Gatsby wear pink? Or what is the big deal about the pink? And that pre-World War II, little girls wore light blue and men wore pink. And then for some reason, and I haven't fully found out why, it switches. They think there's an advertising campaign which switches it post-World War II. I teach history and also art history, and things almost always start for some practical reason. The reason I think that little girls wear light blue, or what's generally considered, it comes all the way, or where the pink-blue divide starts, really is an early Renaissance painting, because you have the Madonna or Mary is almost always painted in light blue. And then Christ, and I'll put some of these examples on the show pages, but if you go all the way back to Giotto, Cimabue, these are like 1200, this is early, even pre-Renaissance, you almost always see Christ in red. It signifies, yes. So then you see the Christ child. So when you see a painting of the Madonna, she's in blue, light blue. The reason it becomes light blue is a very expensive paint. So again, there's always some underlying practical reason. So that then it's called Marian blue after Mary. Yes, because it was easier to produce, and then it becomes more of a light blue instead of the heavy blue, because it's less expensive as a paint. Because blue to this day is somewhat difficult to produce. Like purple's royalty because it's so expensive to produce in the ancient world. And so to contrast it, so you have Mary's blue, Christ is red because of the sacrifice. So the baby becomes pink because, again, it costs us to paint it pink, and also visually it's a contrast. So as you come forward, even Alice in Wonderland, she's wearing a light blue dress. So pink is considered the masculine color up until this point. And so we see it here. The other reason in the early 1900s that women and children are almost always in white is because it's very easy to launder, because they're just bleaching everything. So, you would think, wow, kids playing in white.
Things were not color fast at that time. We're spoiled today.
Yes, we are. So whenever you see anyone wearing clothing, like we'll see here in a minute, someone's wearing a rose gown, that's kind of expensive because, as you said, it's dyed. And we see the pictures of children are almost always in white because, one, it's probably a cotton, maybe a muslin, and to clean it, you just dunk it in bleach, rinse it out. But again, this is why we're seeing, and you'll see it again, this dainty toilette of white and blue. So the blue really is kind of connoting a feminine color. So in terms of the Fitzgeralds, Scott was very known for wearing pink ties. Mm-hmm. And Zelda was, we know from a variety of sources that her favorite colors were pink, a dark pink, and red, which again, I think leans toward her being more tomboyish, that she is not, which I think gets misinterpreted that she's quite feminine because we think, well, she's wearing pink, or she might. And then some people, when they come into the museum, they think Scott was maybe a bit foppish because he's wearing the +4s. He has, everyone knows, but they were very sporty people. It would have been like they would have walked in like a Nike suit, right? Mm-hmm. So they're both wearing golf clothes. And even Turnbull says that he seemed like a college athlete home on the weekend. So he's wearing athletic clothes. He's got that shock of pink tie, which is very masculine. We don't think so. It's very masculine. And I think when you think about Gatsby, I've gone blank, Daisy's husband, Tom, when he goes, oh, he's not an Oxford man, he's wearing pink. It's because it's not, I think we read it now that pink is kind of
effeminate?
Yes, or foppish, mm-hmm. or whatever. But instead, it's particularly when it was written, a pink suit was it was like uber masculine. Mm-hmm. Instead, and I think we read it the opposite. We do have the pink suit on loan from Brooks Brothers from the 2013 film, and people come in and that's in part why they ask, and then you see a lot of it's kind of popular right now. One of the NBA, not the NBA, but Kyler Murray was the #1 draft pick not last year, but the year before, and he wore the pink suit after Gatsby. So it's interesting how that has switched.
And Brooks Brothers to this day, well, I know they're in bankruptcy, but to this day, you can order pink seersucker suits. My brother, in fact, has a pink seersucker jacket. He lives in New York City.
Yeah. So that I just wanted, because it comes up several times how these little girls are wearing white with blue, and culturally, it's just the opposite of what we think of today. But the fact that Zelda's wearing pink so much, Scott's wearing pink, it means that they were...
Well, people thought they looked alike.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think in terms of when they walked in a room, is that they were very sporty, which said one thing. She's wearing a very masculine color, a very bright, brilliant color. He's wearing the pink tie. Even in the paper dolls that she paints of them, you can see he has the pink tie on. I think those are very instructive because, this is her painting, like the hair color, the eye color, and then she jokes, I've given you doggerel green socks. But, he's in that kind of tweedy suit. But the shock of pink or red, I just think is very telling of their personalities. But I think we misinterpret those today.
Not anymore.
No. Hopefully. So we're men. Wear some pink. Looks lovely.
It does. It really does.
Yeah, hopefully we can help bring pink back. The next is 1908, and it is the marriage of Marjorie Sayre to Minor Brinson. And again, I thought the other thing that we don't see or did not come up is that the Sayres don't seem to be throwing these parties. There was not one instance of Zelda's birthday party, or they're going to these parties, but they aren't.
You do know the judge went to sleep at 8 o'clock.
But that's my question. Did he as a young man or did he as an older man?
I think certainly when they're living on Pleasant Avenue.
Yeah. So, because that's a question that still lingers with me, and hopefully we're going to do, because I think we both have a lot of questions about Judge. I think we have different perspectives on him. But I don't know that he's as grumpy or as
I don't think he's
as
grumpy.
Stern as it seems.
I think there's a comic element that people want to see in the relationship between Judge Sayre and Zelda. It's dramatic.
Yeah.
So we sort of see him as a fuss budget. It's.
But I think
whether it's true or not,
the one thing that kind of began
to
change. Because there's the perception of him in Save Me the Waltz, and then you and I have both read Rosalind's papers, and maybe we can do an episode on that, is that her description, she says he wasn't like how she describes him. She uses dramatic license. The other thing about him going to bed early, is this just a way that he opts out of these social events? Like, if they're going to these parties at 10, 12, he's, what, I'm going to bed. I'm not.
They're hen parties.
Yes. So I'm not staying up. I'm not. And Minnie seems to be, she loved people. It's very clear, even until her 90s, that she was very hospitable. So maybe this was just his way. I'm opting out. And so, it's like you go to bed or you take there's two places no one bothers. They're sleeping or they're in the bathroom. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that was his way of I'm shutting the door, leave me alone.
In the novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus, every night he's in his bedroom, in his bed, reading a book.
I was about to say.
His kids are somewhere else. Excuse me, I knocked the mic here. His kids are someplace else having their own life.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is I wonder if he's, quote, he went to bed at 8, but I bet he's in bed, he's reading. Yeah. He has shut the door.
Yeah.
So in terms of this wedding, it says the church was decorated tastefully in masses of palms, vases of bride's roses, and rope of smilax. To the strains of the wedding march from Lohengrin, the bridal party entered at the appointed time. I will skip the ushers. The bridesmaids in single file who entered next were Miss Clotilde Sayre, Miss Jean Leahy. We'll keep going. And then it says, and next followed the maid of honor, Miss Rosalind Sayre, sister of the bride, who entered last, escorted by her father, Judge A.D. Sayre. And this I thought was interesting because often the bride is escorted in by the father. So did she walk in on her own? Because that's not uncommon. I just thought that was interesting. It says, after the ceremony, the wedding party was driven to the home of the bride's parents on Madison Avenue. So again, this is June 1908, and the Sayres don't move to Pleasant Avenue until September of 1908. The home was lavishly adorned in palms, ferns, roses, and carnations. In the drawing room, from a table decorated in pink carnations and smilax, punch was served by Miss J.I. McKinney, who wore a gown of rose silk. In the dining room, the bride's table was a beautiful creation in pink and green, where the pretty plan carried out in Killarney roses, smilax, and tulle, and lighted with tapers and silver candlesticks.
Sounds beautiful.
In this apartment, the cutting of the bride's cake resulted in the ring falling to Miss... Luttrell Wilson, the dime to Rosalind Sayre, and the thimble to little Miss Zelda Sayre. And then it goes on, the bride's wedding gown was of chiffon batiste, made princess, and trimmed elaborately with rose point lace, and with it she wore a little picture hat and carried an arm cluster of bride's roses and lilies of the valley. Her traveling gown was of champagne voile, and with it she wore a hat, gloves, and shoes to match. And then Miss Rosalind Sayre, maid of honor, wore an exquisite toilette of chiffon cloth over pink silk, trimmed with princess lace, and a picture hat trimmed with pink roses. She also carried Killarney roses, and the bridesmaids were gowned in white lingerie and lace. They wore white hats and carried arm clusters of pink carnations.
I'm going to assume lingerie meant something different in 1908.
Yeah, I think it might be a type of like the. We'll look it up. Okay. Like the shirtwaist. But if people don't know, a picture hat is that really big hat. If you saw Titanic and it's that iconic scene of Rose when you first see her and her head looks up, is that massive hat. That's a picture hat. So the bride had a small picture hat, and Rosalind, I guess, had a regular picture hat. But you see the chiffon cloth over pink silk. For those who may not have heard one of our earlier podcasts, Mrs. J.I. McKinney is Kate Slaughter McKinney, who goes on to be the poet laureate. She's wearing, a gown of rose silk. So not an insignificant occasion.
It sounds glorious to me.
But again, where are they? It says masses of palms, like the palms, and the smilax we looked up is kind of maybe like a holly. Well, not like you think boughs of holly.
Yeah, it may not be in the holly family, but it looks like holly, and it has little red berries.
It's leaves, so they're clearly creating boughs or. But I'm again wondering, where are all these plants coming from? Yeah, because when we were looking at the honeybees, and again, this goes back to Mrs. McKinney. She apparently had these beautiful plum trees, which plums are the first to bloom. They even bloom when it. So she either has plum or cherry. Anyway, they kind of an Asian tree. And that someone had come and cut branches off, and she was very angry, who did this? And it made the newspaper, who is the tree thief? And I thought, well, somebody clearly decorated for their party. Because, hey, I need some flowers. Because I think you had a story about Zelda taking someone's flowers as a child.
Yes. It's from Nancy Milford's book. It's a typical young Zelda story. One of the reasons we all love her. I'll just read it here. It's very brief. Once Zelda arrived late at a birthday party, carrying a big pot of pink geraniums. It seemed that it's such an unusual gift that after the party, the mother of the girl for whom the party had been given called Mrs. Sayre. After hearing the story, Mrs. Sayre said, "So that's what became of my geranium." So she's taking pots of geranium, probably cement ones, if I know Zelda, and she's carrying them to parties and handing them to other little kids.
But it doesn't seem that weird now when you consider these parties are just filled with flowers.
That's true.
And then you think, where are the? We'll have to look up Rosemont Gardens, because Rosemont Gardens is still it's not far from us now. Mm-hmm. It's still the primary florist, and when you are looking through the newspapers, they have a lot of really beautiful ads. So I'm wondering if they are, I think it's probably a mix. Some of the roses and flowers that are in vases are probably coming from particularly for a wedding. But these boughs of smilax and
must have been quite glorious.
And then I think, where are palms? There are not that many palms here. No.
No, not that I.
So I'm wondering,
I can't help but think that Zelda's mother gave her pocket money to buy some flowers, and Zelda spent it on candy.
So one of the last ones we have, and this one is in 1909, and it's. I thought it was interesting. It's Mrs. Auerbach entertains the baby taunts. It says, Miss Marion and Lorraine Auerbach entertained the baby taunts most delightfully yesterday afternoon at their home on Pleasant Avenue. So the Sayres are they've been there about a year. says the Baby Taunts, which, by the way, is a very charming club, is the youngest social organization in the city and is composed of some 20 or more young misses whose ages range from 10 to 13 years old. The club meets once a week and has a, quote, real good time. It says, at the meeting yesterday, Miss Louise Gunnels was elected president for the coming year and Miss Vivian Stowe secretary. It says the entire home was thrown open to the young guest and attractively decorated with cut flowers and ferns. Now, ferns do grow kind of behind the house. I can see them go out there clipping ferns. Punch was served from a table adorned in white and green by Miss Clotilde Sayre, who was assisted in entertaining. It says a guessing contest was enjoyed, and the prize, a box of candy, was won by Miss Zelda Sayre, and the booby prize goes to poor Rebby Riley. And it says a delicious 2-course luncheon was served after the games. And again, we have the young hostesses wore dainty gowns of white lingerie and lace. So we're going to have to figure out what lingerie is. But to think that they are having these social organizations for children as young as 9, that I think this is where later we see Zelda. I think this is what people think of Zelda, that she is this debutante. And I mean, it's called the Baby Taunts. And that this is that kind of debutante life that she lives in. But that's why I think, and why we did the episode on the honeybees, is that her mother really breaks from this tradition or this convention, because her mother's social society, it's not just women having these social parties, and
she's having intellectual.
She's having an intellectual one. There are men and women present.
Poetry, plays.
There's poetry, there's music, there's plays. That the people attending are both men and women. Also, again, I think it's significant, like Rabbi Messing's there, that religiously
It's diverse.
Is quite diverse and quite bohemian. But here we can see that, and I think this may be the convention. I think this is the stereotype that a lot of the biographers assume, that she's growing up in this very debutante country club. She's got meat at the country club. I don't think the country club then is what a country club is now, much less what a country club was from like the 50s through.
Yeah, well, certainly we know the country club that she went to was a very rough and tumble place, actually.
Oh, it looked like a barn.
Yeah.
We'll have pictures, but I mean, I was looking at the pictures of it last night, the interior, and it's not this beautiful jazz age deco. I mean, it just looks like
it doesn't look like the country club we have
well,
today.
It looked like. Then it was again, and I think it was very indicative of them. It looked like if you now you go to Lake Martin and you have these $1 million homes. But when we were younger, you had a lake house, and a lake house was a lake house.
A shack.
Well, it was a little better than but it was a little better than a shack, but it was more rustic. Yeah. It didn't have amenities, you didn't have TV. People, went for the weekend, and it had a lot of that. Because this was in the 80s, early 90s. But it had all that leftover 1776 stuff, Mm-hmm. Had like the Patriot and all that stuff. And I think that's when I was looking at the country club, what it looked like. It was more rustic. It was clearly for sports. It was not golf. Done because they were golf, tennis. And it wasn't yet. It just seemed more utilitarian and masculine, and it wasn't yet frilly and society, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And then the last one I want to do is 19. There's one more. What?
You had to hand me something that had food in it.
Oh,
so
yes.
I got obsessed with this.
Oh, yes. And you'll see this on our show. I did print out. It's an ad from the Montgomery Advertiser. And it has all these candies. It's 1910. It's the Christmas candies. And just read through. Man, they had great candy.
Holy
bulk candies received. And it's interesting because we don't have some of these. Like, I don't know what a lime ball is. Clear mint balls, jelly beans, coconut bonbons.
I mean, peppermint wafers, little buttercups. I mean, I'm just going crazy here. Chocolate, Grenoble walnuts, chocolate.
I want to know what
menthe.
raisin fudge. That's the only one that did not entice me. and I like raisins and I like fudge.
Just not together. Chocolate figulettes. This is from the Montgomery Fair, which was the major department store downtown. Yeah. Very famous in history. Rosa Parks worked.
Yes. And it was down on the corner. I mean, today the Rosa Parks statue is there. It's by the fountain. So this is, off Dexter. It's kind of off.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take you off.
No. I put this, but when we talk about she had a sweet tooth and these people are getting boxes of candy, I went, well, what kind are they getting?
This is what they're getting.
Lemon drops.
Nougatines.
Lemon drops, ice cream, chocolate drops, nougat bars, maraschino cherry bars. The ones that kind of, the fig, because I love figs. It's like, what is a chocolate figolette?
Divinity is very big down here. Because I spend a lot of time at the markets, the curb markets here, and they're always selling Divinity, but I don't see it here. So maybe it's a later craze.
Divinity, I associate Divinity with spring, not Christmas. I don't know that.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
Because this is a Christmas sale.
Yeah.
And then the Italian chocolate bonbons. So the price is again 49 cents, 25 cents. So $1 is about 25. So we're talking a box is $10, $15.
That makes sense.
And some of this is 20 cents by a special, and this is by the pound. Special, the pound, 10 cents. Wow. And then this other 20 cents a pound.
On the negative side, think of dentistry in 1910.
Oh. Yeah.
So maybe it's better we don't have this today.
So the last one, and this is in 1914. So this is the other thing in my notes I wanted to add, that at a certain age, Zelda, when we go through the newspaper clippings, I'm looking for my notes, because we've got a lot of stuff painted out, that basically she stops going to these parties, and that instead of her name turning up in parties, here it is, beginning in 1912, the mentions of Zelda at parties, there's no more, but she's now in dance recitals. So we're going to start, and even before the dance recitals start a little bit earlier, and that's going to be an episode in hopefully the near future, is that people seem to think she began to learn to dance in her 20s. I don't know. But she didn't. She started quite young here. It's just that she wanted to be a prima ballerina and she started too late for that.
Yeah.
So this last one, it's held, Mrs. J.J. Mayfield entertained a number of young people charmingly Thursday afternoon in compliment to Miss Mary Gully of Tuscaloosa. And this is Sarah Mayfield's mother. So it's Judge Mayfield's wife. The home was decorated with a wealth of cut flowers and ferns and presented a most attractive scene. Vases of Shasta daisies and white oleander were used in the parlor, and the veranda was enclosed with smilax, and here and there a hanging basket of white roses. In the dining room, the table was decorated with Japanese candlesticks. The centerpiece was cut glass vase filled with yellow oleanders. Punch was served from a prettily appointed table on the porch. Here it is. An orchestra rendered sweet music and dancing was enjoyed throughout the afternoon. Ices and cakes were served. So this is a huge party. And you see it's all the names: Zelda Sayre, Annie Paul Goldthwait, Martha Thornton. I would imagine, because this is the Mayfields, they lived in and around near the Pleasant Avenues. So the Thornton is like Winter Thornton, the Winter Place. So it's a who's who, but this is, again, quite a party. I mean, with its own, and that was the question that I had. I think this answers it. They had their own band or orchestra. Mm-hmm. One last thing, going back, because we skipped over it, at the wedding party, it said that
Marjorie.
At Marjorie's wedding, this poor woman's name, is it Lucharel? I don't know. Miss Wilson, she got the ring. And so what it was, if you're from the South and you know about king cake, there's the baby in the king cake. Do you get the baby? So apparently that at this time period, there was this, tradition that I read different places that there was a ribbon and that you would pull ribbons from the cake.
Sometimes they would attach them to trees during birthday parties, and children would pull these strings.
Yeah. Well, this is, I think, specific to a wedding party, because if you get the ring, it's like if you toss the bouquet, you're the next to get married. And then there was a dime, which Rosalind got, which indicated they were like a fortune, and so that you got
they were symbolic.
Yeah, they were symbolic. So the dime meant that you got a fortune. In other areas, it said if you got the penny, you were going to be poor, because these had negative ones. Like, we would never have a negative one. And then it says, and the thimble went to Miss Zelda Sayre, and the thimble meant that you were going to be a spinster. And so reading it, you kind of think, well, I mean, she wasn't, but she kind of was toward the end. So,
well, she was a widow.
Yeah, she was a widow. But I just thought it was just the fact that she's 7 going on 8, and she gets the spinster prize. There was also in this tradition, you got a button. If you were a man and got the button, you were going to be whatever, a bachelor. I think a woman's called a spinster, but a man, he's just a bachelor. And then in one other story, someone got the thimble, but then they called it the bouquet. So that, they were supposed to be the next. So they didn't know how it would work out, because they got the spinster, but then they were going to be married next.
I do think that spinster originally simply meant an unmarried woman.
Yeah.
It got negative connotations as time went on. And today, of course, if you call somebody a spinster, you're calling them an old maid. You're calling them unappealing to men. You know. But I don't think originally it was meant to be an insult. It just, like anything else, it just acquired meaning.
The last one, and when I was doing the research trying to figure out what the thimble was, is it said that a man had gotten it, and that he was considered a Benedict. And it says the Benedict was, and I thought of H.L. Mencken. It was a man, because let's face it, there's a lot of men too. We would not call them confirmed bachelors. They're just men who are they're going to play the field. But that basically a Benedict was a man who you thought was a, quote, confirmed bachelor who then marries. So, it was kind of like, the guy that everyone wants to catch, and and then he suddenly marries someone. So that was what a Benedict was.
Like Warren Beatty, you mean? Somebody who was
probably,
married at 70.
Kind of. But, the person that everyone has their eye on, and they think, oh, he's not going to go. And then suddenly he's married. Okay. He's considered a Benedict. So there was a negative, or I guess it was that's more sour grapes.
Well, I think I learned a lot today, I must say.
Well, we hope you enjoyed Zelda's early party days. We are not such in-party days today, but we hope you're all well, and hopefully things are looking better wherever you are. When things do settle down, please consider come visiting us. Also, all these images that and articles will be on our show pages, so you can go to thefitzgeraldmuseum.org. Click on the podcast show pages. You can go to our Facebook page, and we also have a Zelda's Peaches and Biscuit Facebook group. You can click to join it. We normally post on it first, and then it trickles out after. But if you have any questions, any recommendations, we'd love to hear from you. So email us too. And I guess until next time, stay well and goodbye.